Good afternoon, hello, and you are very welcome to this afternoon's debate brought to you by Euractiv together with the Centre for Analysis of Democratic Processes. Today we are going to be talking about the Uzbekistan 2024 parliamentary elections and looking ahead at that road towards a democratic future. My name is Jennifer Baker. I will be your moderator today, and we will have two panels over the course of the coming hours. Remember, of course, you can share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag #EADebates, and we also invite you, particularly the audience online, but also everyone here joining us live in the room, to ask questions using Slido. You can scan the QR code that you can see there on your screen. If you're in the room, please do use your smartphone to do that and put in the questions, which I will receive for our excellent panelists. And if you are joining us online, you can put those questions in the box on the screen. So hopefully we will hear lots of thoughts over the coming hours. Our first panel, we'll be looking more closely at those elections, meeting the candidates, and later on our second panel will focus on the relationship between the EU, Central Asia, and of course Uzbekistan leading that and asking what are the avenues for future cooperation. But let us start, of course, with that first panel, and we're delighted to have joining us here in Brussels Senator Sodiq Safoyev, who is the first Deputy Speaker of the Senate of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Thank you very much, sir. Eldor Tulyakov is Executive Director of the Development Strategy Centre, where he's closely involved in implementing key national reforms of the Republic of Uzbekistan and including various actions and the Uzbekistan 2030 strategy. We will talk to you more about that. Uktir Saidov is Head of Department at the Centre for Analysis of Democratic Processes. We'll bring a lot of insider knowledge to today's discussion. And Norder Telyavoldiv is Deputy Chairman, National Revival Democratic Party, and one of the parties in the election, which is at the forefront of our minds today. So, Senator, let me start with you. Explain the electoral process for us in Uzbekistan. Give us a 101 to those of us in Brussels who maybe are not so familiar.
Jennifer, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here, and I'd like to express my appreciation to Euractiv and our embassy to Brussels, Ambassador Faiziyev, who joined us today, for organizing this very important event. Indeed, for us in Uzbekistan, it's very important to bring message from my country, which is going through the deep transformation. And I think that such kind of a dialogue is something which might create more understanding and trust between the regions, nations, cultures. And that's why, once again, I appreciate this chance to address this audience. And I'd like to welcome also the participants joining us online. Question about the coming exactly in 1 month elections. I think they have a tremendous importance for my country. First of all, it's first election after the adjusting constitution to the new realities. And it will be testimony how this constitution, new version of constitution, works. Secondly, Uzbekistan is or maybe already started, the second phase of reforms, which will demand more decisive actions, political will, more inclusive decision-making process, and the coming elections supposed to elect new parliament, which will be crucial in implementing challenging decisions for making next stage of our modernization process successful. That's why I think that it's very important, and I'm sure that my colleagues here will explain more about the details, what makes coming elections special and about their future. Let me stop here, not to monopolize the audience, and then I will be happy to respond to you, Jennifer, questions and the questions from audience.
Thank you very much. You've set the scene, and I think remind us all that globally it's a big year for elections, for democracy, and something that obviously we're really focused on for the next 12 months, if not longer. Mr. Tulyakov, I mentioned some of the projects you work on. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and how that feeds into the elections.
Thank you, Jennifer. I also want to thank the organizers and the audience for being part of this very important event for us because, as already mentioned, Uzbekistan has been changing, and the very important thing is that the government now understands very well that it cannot carry out all the reforms itself. Therefore, working with the civil society, working with active NGOs is very important for the government currently. Therefore, they are in close contact with experts, with civil society activists, both locally and from abroad. Therefore, the Development Strategy Center, where I work, is part of these initiatives to make sure that the voices of the society are heard at all levels of policy making, be it drafting certain specific document, like strategies, like laws, bylaws, and then when even implementing those documents, the civil society is a very active part of current reforms because they monitor. So they are engaged, first of all, in drafting those documents. And now, after that, they are also active in monitoring the implementation of those documents. So we, as part of these reforms, coordinate all these efforts to make sure that civil society is heard at all levels of policy making. And we also try to ensure that civil society is actively involved in ensuring accountability of the public officials.
Not always an easy job, we know that.
Of course, it's a huge challenge.
Mr. Saidov, tell us why we're here today. Obviously, the Centre is one of the driving forces between today's event. What's important for you? Give us your opening remarks.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be part of this conversation about the upcoming parliamentary elections and democratic processes in Uzbekistan. Initially, I want to speak about brief information about our center. Our center was organized in 2022, and the main objective of our center is system analysis of whole democratic processes in Uzbekistan, and the monitoring and forecasting the socio-economic and social-political issues in the regions. And today, I would like to speak about the participation of the importance of participation of NGOs, civil society institutions in the process of election, and the diversity of election programs of political parties in upcoming parliamentary elections. And as we know, these parliamentary elections historical for Uzbekistan because for the first time in history, our population will vote not for only certain candidates, but for the platforms of political parties, their viewpoints and strategies for Uzbekistan's future.
Well, Mr. Tilavaldev, you're representing one of those parties here today. Tell us your perspective. Give us your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here, and thank you very much for allocating your time and to join this event. National Revival Party, it's in Uzbek, it's Milli Tiklanaj. It's the second largest party in Uzbekistan. We're second largest party in the parliament of Uzbekistan. We have 36 seats in the parliament and more than 1,200 seats in local councils. And Milli Tiklanaj stands apart from other parties with its unique vision rooted in promoting national values and national identity. We think that modernity shouldn't come at the cost of the national values. And as my colleagues highlighted, we are having very important political process. On the 27th of October, we'll have parliamentary elections and the election for the local councils. And it's very important because it's happening in the new legal framework defined in our constitution, and it's happening under strong parliamentarism because new constitution have enshrined the powers of the parliament. So this is very important. And our political party, Milli Tiklanaj, has done a great job to prepare for this election. And I think we're going to compete in a very highly competitive environment, and we hope that we're going to win a lot of seats both in the local council and in the parliament.
Well, obviously you're optimistic. Of course, you must be going into an election. It's the way to be. Senator, tell me, in your view, what are the main challenges for both political and economic sort of modernization in Uzbekistan? Maybe start with the political side first, and then tell us how political modernization can aid the economic side.
Yeah, first of all, let me state and underscore once again that country is committed to build up secular democracy based on supremacy of law, open civil society, and socially oriented market economy. Getting rid of previous system, which was mainly based on centralized, mainly closed political system, untransparent governance, and let's say it was not inclusive towards the civil society. We are talking about genuine political and economic modernization. And Jennifer, you, to my mind, put the question in a very correct way. First, political transformation. You know, we grown up from the Marxistic cradle from the Soviet Union, and for many years we believed that economic transformation should be first, and then political transformation will come later. But then it became clear that without applying good governance, respect to human rights and liberties, political system which guarantees the ownership right, freedom of entrepreneurship, without parliament, strong parliament, and civil society, it will not work. Economic takeoff should be prioritized with the upgrading, modernizing political system. And that's why President Mirziyoyev, from the first day of in his office, started to concentrate exactly on political transformation. Today we're proud with our record on human rights. The role of parliament is growing. The civil society is getting more and more involved. Society was awakened by reforms, and the people are demanding to know everything, and they are critical about the functioning of government. Not everybody happy with that. Government is not happy that it's criticized, that it's transparent, but it's only way to bring some dynamism to development. In general, transformation looks like very lucrative idea, but in real life, it has some impediments, some obstacles. For instance, economic liberalization. Sounds great, but it means inflation normally. It means redistribution of ownership system, more privatization, prices going up, but without that there will be no investments. Land reform started, and it's not easy for people even with this old mentality to believe that it's good. It's not embezzlement of national assets, it's about bringing some new form of the governance. That's why I think that the main challenges of transformation comes to the capacity building. Who is going to implement reforms? Of course, old guard is skillful and experienced, but we need new generation of people who knows how to implement the new kind of reforms, and not only believe to the reform, but know how to do that. And lastly, I think that modernization, as in any society, means changing of mentality of people, accustomed to the new paradigm of development. So it's the main, perhaps to my mind, main challenges of transformation.
I'm sure we'll come back to pick up on some of those
Sure.
other points in a moment. But Eldar, let me come on to you and pick up on something the Senator said, which is about the government being criticised. Being able to critique your government is a central part of being a modern democracy. And so what sort of appetite is there in Uzbekistan? Is society really actively engaged, and do they want to take part in this kind of civil reform, the country's political life? Is that something that you see and feel?
Yes, Jennifer, thank you for this question. I should mention that the atmosphere has changed over the 6-7 years with the purpose to engage public in political reforms. And as such, a variety of mechanisms, channels, initiatives have been adopted to make sure that voices are heard at all levels of political life of the country. So first of all, the very important thing is the principle was taken as a cornerstone of future reforms, which is called the dialogue with people. So talking to people has been a priority of the current process of reforms. In that sense, I should mention that talking means they should have different channels, either physical interaction, which means all public officials, starting from the president himself, ministers, officials, governors, started talking to people and getting to know their ideas, proposals, critique in terms of the reforms that must be implemented. Yeah? Other than that, the digital platforms like virtual reception of the president, prime minister, governors, have been established, virtual reception of the parliament. Of course, not everyone can use those digital technologies. That's why physical offices of president's office have been created in all regions and districts of the country, where people could come and express their opinions, challenge the current reforms, and provide ideas and further proposals. So that's why I should mention that because of these mechanisms, because of these channels, people feel that they need to express. Because I will give an example with the fact that when, for example, specific documents, including the strategies, when they are, for example, discussed publicly before their adoption, people express themselves, and afterwards the Development Strategy Center gives them feedback whose proposals have been taken into consideration at the final document, and we reward them for their proposals, for their engagement in discussion. We try to do it at the presence of other society members to motivate the others that why don't you, for example, take the initiative next time when we discuss this important document and be more active providing proposals for the future of the country. So we try to motivate them and try to show them on TV, saying, hey, look, this person was active and his proposal or her proposal was included in the final document, which is signed by the president, and now it will be a priority for the whole government. So that's why they feel motivated. When they get the feedback, when they know that their voices are heard, they feel motivated. That's why they try to, of course, be more active and participate in all those reforms. But there are, of course, challenges.
Let me ask, to clarify, these are individuals or people or citizens and members of civil society. We're not talking about necessarily lobby groups, because here in Brussels we've no trouble getting them involved.
I absolutely mean the ordinary people, very ordinary people from remote sides of the country. They know, they follow the politics currently. They, if not on TV, they of course active on social networks, on media, because now the public officials are active in all ways of communicating with people, because they do understand that not everybody watches TV. So that's why they also try to use social networks, internet to reach their audience. So.
Utke, I'd like you to, as someone who's not one of the parties, talk us through the different positions of the 5, I believe, political parties that are standing, because of course political pluralism is important for a functioning democracy. Tell us what they are, what their platforms are. Give us an insight into what people are thinking about as they look ahead to vote in 1 month.
Thank you very much. As we all know, political pluralism, the lifeblood of every healthy political system. In Uzbekistan, also political reforms are closely connected with the development of political pluralism. If as look at the political parties' election platforms, the differences are clear. One example: Liberal Democratic Party's economical point of view. Liberal Democratic Parties focuses on the economic liberalization, the market reforms, and reducing the state intervention in the economy. In contrast, People's Democratic Party adopts state-centric political reforms, state-centric economic reforms. They advocate for balanced economy and the state intervention to market economy system. It shows that the political pluralism in not only in the political parties' election platforms, but all the social life of Uzbekistan is getting more better than other period of our development.
Let me come to you, Nodir, because you're representing Milli Tükanish. Am I pronouncing it right? Okay, I'm doing my best. Tell us in more detail about what your party stands for and how you attract voters. I'm also interested in some of the things that Eldor was saying about new technologies, about social media. What is it that your party is doing?
Mm-hmm. As I said, Milli Tükanish is the second largest political party in Uzbekistan. And Milli Tükanish is a special party because we put a high priority on national values. Of course, in our platform, there are many aspects of the economic and social parts, but for us, the most important thing is preserving our national culture, national values. We think that, as I said before, modernity shouldn't come at the cost of the losing the national values. As he said, we have different look at some aspects from other parties. For example, Liberal Democrats are the party of the entrepreneurs, farmers, and the businesses. Milli Tükanish also support businesses, but we consider craftsmen as a unique people who preserve our culture. That's why supporting craftsmen, supporting businesses who deal with the national traditions, it's not only for economical reasons, but it's also for national preservation. They're the bearers of our traditions. Also regarding the taxation system, we think that taxation should be more simplified, and we think that people who make more money or businesses who make more money, they should pay more. And entrepreneurs should take more social responsibility. And we'll also consider tourism as an important sector of the economy, because with the tourism, we can show our culture, we can show our tradition, we can show our history to the whole world. And it's an important part of the economy, and we can increase our GDP by developing the tourism. If we talk about the difference in the social sphere, we put a very high priority on the family. You know that in our part of the world, family is a very sacred. We protect the institution of the family. And for us, it's very important to keep the healthy, the spiritual and the mental health of the mothers and of the younger generation. We put a high priority on education. In fact, Milli Tükanish is a flagman of the education reforms. We always talk about education because we believe that education is the only right way which will lead to the prosperity. We think that education and upbringing should come together and should complement each other. Education and upbringing. If we provide good education but upbringing is not good, it will not be very good for the country. And also we think that the process of choosing teachers from the start when they apply to universities, we think that the universities must choose the most dedicated, the most talented youth, and all their education should be paid by the government, and the government should support all the teachers all through their life. We think this is a key. And also, I can say that regarding the environmentalism, military planners support ecology, but we think that environmentalism should come together with the national traditions, because it's our tradition to plant the trees. It's our tradition to save what surrounds us. It's our tradition to appreciate what we have. As you can see, there are some similarities, but we put a very high priority on national values, and that makes our party different from others, and that's why people, more and more people are choosing us, because always national tradition, language, and culture is very important in Central Asia, and especially in Uzbekistan.
Well, let me come back. You mentioned the younger generation, you're putting a big focus on education.
Yes.
Where are you reaching out to those young people? What is sort of demographic do they make up in Uzbekistan, and how do you find them? Are they on social media? Are you reaching them in the schools? Where is that happening?
Thank you. As you know, Uzbekistan's populations, 60% consists of young people. That's why we put a high priority on young people, and we try to foster a younger generation who are not only globally competitive, but also tied to our tradition, tied to Uzbekistan, whatever they are. And we try to work in the communities, because those people live in the communities. Those people live not only in the capital, in remote parts of Uzbekistan. And as I said, we have more than 1,200 deputies in local councils. And through those deputies, we'll have a different platform, we'll have different programs which we can reach this younger generation, and where we can talk about the importance of education. And in fact, Millet Klanaj was a party who recommended the government to have a specific class in the specific subject in the schools, which is called upbringing. Before, that kind of subject didn't exist. Now, from the first grade till the 11th grade, this kind of subject are taught in every class. And in this subject, we try to teach all the younger generation, as I told you, our national culture, national value, and the importance to be proud of Uzbekistan.
Well, Senator, let me come to you. And obviously, you've highlighted that the parliamentary elections have a particular significance. Do you think that understanding is trickling down throughout the different demographic groups? And perhaps give us your sense of what they are and what might be getting them out to vote in a month's time, and what sort of turnout are you expecting as well?
Well, it's a very good question. Challenging question, actually. It's perhaps most important priority for every party to find a relevant way how to find their own constituency. You know, as Nader said correctly, but maybe I will a little bit correct your statistic. 2/3 of population in Uzbekistan, not 60%, are younger than 30 years old. They don't remember Soviet Union or any kind of they know their generation of new era. My students in my university now are using AI. The social networking perhaps is more actively used than traditional media sources like TV or newspapers. So I think that parties, and I think that some of them, and the party which another represents, use very well social networking, which is more efficient for addressing the young generation. And definitely, it means not only how to find a way to connect with a constituency. The point is, what kind of idea you bring, how you're going to appeal to them. And definitely, why the coming elections are important, because this is the best way to create trust between government and public. Free and fair elections is the only way to get any confidence. Not everybody will be happy. There will be winners and losers. But if people will see that it's transparent, it's fair, and it's according to the international standards and domestic laws, they must accept that. You know, after all, let's see to the other regions surrounding us. Many turmoil and chaos in many countries started with the not free and not fair elections, right? That's why for us it's important to have these elections in a way that it will be accepted by majority of people. By the way, not only the people, we are open for international observation. Up this today, close to 1,000 international observers, including OSCE, it's a special institution for democratic institutes and human rights in Warsaw, ODIHR, the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE. Today, this morning, we had a meeting in the European Parliament, and we invited them also to send international observers, and people representing American Congress, British Westminster or Parliament, friends from all democratic countries will be in Tashkent, and they will help us to make these coming elections free and fair. In short, we think that it's all up to each political party to find relevant to this modern age way and means how to find a way to the heart and mind of people and try to convince them that their program, their ideas is best for the future of this country.
Well, if they don't reach the people, they won't be elected. So
Yeah,
that's a given. But Eldar and Utkir, afterwards, I'd like you both to address the same question. The Senator has mentioned there the possibility of external or foreign oversight into the elections. What sort of challenges still exist there, or obstacles to gaining that public involvement, to gaining that oversight within Uzbekistan and also without, in terms of oversight? What would you say still needs to happen, or would you like to see happen?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. As I already mentioned, engaging public is very important, but there are still challenges that Uzbekistan needs to deal with. There are several. First of all, for example, officials and the society, NGOs should still concentrate on working further to raise the public awareness of the society. Because now currently, due to the reforms, there is an extensive practice of adopting new regulations, new laws, which, let's say, foresee certain benefits for the society, so certain privileges, both for the society, for the business. Like, for example, now, due to the energy reforms, there are several incentives to install, let's say, to utilize solar stations, installing solar stations. For that, there are several tax incentives. But people, like some other areas, are not aware of these new initiatives of the government to support the society. So that's why there are still needs to be steps taken to raise the public awareness of the society. Another important issue, now the government is working hard to digitalize lots of its activities. There are several reasons for that. First of all, to combat corruption. Second of all, to make sure that citizens get these public services anytime, which is convenient for them, by eliminating human factor. So, but the challenge is that not everybody can use those digital platforms. Yeah? So that's why increasing digital literacy is very important. It's another challenge for the society that we need to work. Another important issue is that, already mentioned, is that young generation have its own let's say, point of view, its own ideas on different aspects, and because they read a lot, because they are very often on internet, they can approach one issue from different aspects. So that's why this also makes the life of officials and activists more difficult to make sure that they are in line with the priorities of the young generation. And another challenge I would like to mention is the capacity building. Capacity building is important for public officials also, because they need to know how to deal with the society, because they need to understand that they are not experts in different fields. So that's why it's very important for them. From the other side, it's also important for the civil society, because they need to be able to make sure that their voices are heard. They need to know their rights. They need to make sure to approach the right person or use the right digital platform to exercise their rights. So that's why these are some of the challenges that I would like to mention at this point.
Utker, same question. What are your views on the challenges?
It's very important to mention that civil society, especially NGOs, play a great role, crucial role in the engagement of people to elections. According to the analysis of our center, in this upcoming parliamentary elections, more than 1,000 NGOs actively participating in promoting the electoral legislative literacy and monitoring activities. And civil society institutions, especially NGOs, organizing several events, especially directed to the promoting transparency and encouraging the active civic participation in these parliamentary and local Kengesh elections.
Well, I want to come back, Eldor, to something you touched on, and I'd like everybody's view on this. You mentioned media literacy or digital literacy, and we also talked about using digital tools to reach out to, in particular, younger voters. What degree does something like electoral interference or disinformation or malinformation or bad messaging from within and but also with outside Uzbekistan concern you? Do you think that sort of problem is something you're going to see? It's certainly something that at EU level is talked about a lot.
Yes, this is one of the concerns of the strategy, the development strategy for 2020-2026 of Uzbekistan, digital literacy and establishing an immunity of everyone to sort the information that they are possessing, that they are consuming, I would say. So that's why now, because of the massive, let's say, establishment of different sources of media, both TV channels, because now we have over 190 foreign TV channels in Uzbekistan, which is something very new for the Uzbek society, because in the past there were only limited number of foreign channels. Yeah? And then there is the internet speed has increased several times, and there are media internet outlets operating in Uzbekistan. Their numbers have also increased. Additionally, we have the civil, I would say, the bloggers, yeah, who comment on different aspects of daily life. So their numbers also have increased, and which means that there are different sources of information that can be consumed, and it's a hard task to control, to interfere. We of course have the risk of the fact that some media outlets may bring the false information. They may, let's say, bring an information which is which can be false. Yeah. So that's why it's a challenge. But already mentioned, the priority in that is that the government is working to educate the society, educating to sort the information and increasing the awareness of the current political life, increasing the awareness of current legislation changes, so that they make sure that the information they are consuming is legal, is, for example, close to political reforms happening in Uzbekistan. So I can once again say that it's a challenge, but the government is not only working with the media, for example, by expanding their presence, but also working with the society to make sure that they are able to sort out the right information.
I would like your thoughts, Senator. Yes.
It's immensely important question. You know, since role of local parliaments and central parliament, both chambers, have greatly increased in two aspects. And you will immediately appreciate that it's something very important. First of all, forming and exercising budget in all levels. Parliaments are today actually managing the asset, how to allocate money, how to form it. Secondly, today it's up to the parliament appoint some, the key position, ministers, prosecutors, ambassadors. And secondly, they're supposed to exercise parliamentarian oversight over their activity. So it's in all level, grassroots level, local parliaments, and it's created incentives for people to run for the office. It never before in Uzbekistan we observed such an interest to become a member of parliament or local parliament. And sometimes even people want to be there to get some parliamentary immunity for their activity. So for protecting themselves, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes there is some illegal activities also might be applied. The point is that we have system of laws which we created in accordance with the recommendation of OSCE. It's ODIHR, or Organization for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. However, adopting the law doesn't mean that tomorrow it will function well. The point is that public society, NGOs, should be very active. I mentioned 1,000, approximately 1,000 international observers who will monitor not only the day of elections. For instance, yesterday, the big delegation of OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and there is started their long-term monitor system in Uzbekistan, which they will then provide us and the international community with their assessment of the improper use of some parliamentary. But at the same time, I think it's more important for us that approximately 10,000 local observers representing each party, you also have, right? In every constituency, there will be a representative of civil society who should. It's up to the society itself to make sure that it will be healthy election. So there is no other remedy. I think that we all, with AI, artificial intelligence, with the new system, the questions which you raised, it's up to every society. There is no perfect elections, but we should make sure that it will be transparent and open to the public oversight.
I was going to come on and actually ask you to highlight some of the key changes in the election code that had been brought about as a result of advice or recommendations from some of these external, oversight observers. What are they? Are there any particular ones that stand out for you?
Thank you. I just would like to highlight a few key changes in our election legislation. As it was mentioned, elections are not perfect. There is always a room to improve. And in 2019, the first time we adopted the election code, which unified 5 legal laws and more than 40 legal acts. And this year we also made very important changes in our election code. The first time for the election for the for legislative chamber will be use the mixed election system. So 75 deputies will be elected directly through from one mandate district, and 75 deputies will be elected according to a party list proportional representation according to the percentage of vote they get. So this is a major change. So another change is that recently we made amendment to our election code, and according to that change, all parties must ensure that 40% of all the candidates are women. So this is very important. And according to the information which was given by the Central Election Committee 2 days ago, 44.7% of all the candidates are now women. So this is very running for parliament. Yes, running for the parliament. And another change is that in the past, for the electoral system, for the majority system, we use the relative majority. But when the 5 parties are competing each other, getting the absolute majority is very different. It's very difficult. That's why most of the time we ended up having a second round of elections. And of course, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of financial resources. That's why in the election code, we change it to the relative majority than the absolute majority. And another major important change is that digitalization of the election process. I think that this upcoming election will be the most digitalized election in the history of Uzbekistan, except for the voting, because we still use a paper ballot. All process will be fully digitalized. All the interaction between the parties, between the candidates and the trusted people, media, with the election committee will be digitalized. Of course, it will help the human intervention. It will eliminate human intervention. It will reduce paperwork, and it will reduce the bureaucracy. That's one of the key things. And all the voters can find the whole information about the election process. I mean, the candidates' CVs, their programs, and the number of voters. So the whole thing will be fully digitalized. And regarding the observations, you said that, you mentioned, of course, observations are a key part of the elections. They provide the credibility, the public confidence in the election. And we are always open for discussion after when the observers submit their reports. We're always ready to discuss them. And I can say that from the previous recommendation which were given to Uzbekistan, we already reflected many of them in our election code. For example, one of the recommendations were given that people who are in the jail,
It's talking about the recommendation done to us by Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Organization for Democratic Institutions, and so it's done by experts.
Yes. So the recommendation was given that the people who are in the prison who didn't commit serious crimes, they couldn't vote in the past. Now they're entitled to vote, so they experience their constitutional rights. And another recommendation was given to increase the inclusiveness. By inclusiveness, I mean both participation women as a candidates and the people, handicapped people, people with disabilities. As I said, all the parties are showing not less than 40% as a candidate, women candidates, both for majority system and for proportional system. So another recent amendment we made in the election code, which is also which was recommended, was that in order to avoid the falsification of the electoral process, the member of the election committee who gave the multiple ballots or who created condition for the third-party vote, now they will be administratively fined. So, and another recommendation, for example, was to create a single electronic voting system so that one person cannot go from location to another location to vote. We have done that. So gradually we're studying this recommendation and we're trying to reflect it on our election code. Of course, there are a lot of more recommendations. We're working on that, and I think our parliament with the Central Election Committee will keep working on that and further reflect those changes in our law. Thank you.
Well, you've answered the next question I was going to ask you, actually, which was, to what degree do the candidates represent the demographic makeup of Uzbekistan? But you've seen that you're saying there's a lot of steps in the right direction there with gender and ability quotas to meet. So I'll take this point then to remind everyone who's watching online, as well as those in the room, that you can put your questions to our panellists. Simply use that QR code or use the box on the screen beside you and set your questions, because we've got about 15 minutes left here for the rest of this panel. And I want to come back, Utkir, to you to ask about the role of civil society organisations, particular NGOs, in what comes next. So we've heard a lot about the challenges running up to the election, the great move to get people out to vote and really participate in what is quite an exciting point in democracy for Uzbekistan. What happens after the elections? Where do we see assessment of what has gone on, whether we will see looking at whether elections were fair and transparent, as we have to do, and also, because it is something that even very mature democracies have to do, is take stock of where things could be done better in the future. We know here with the European elections that took place earlier this year that there was this outside disinformation, and that was something that we received a sort of mark saying could do better. Do you foresee something like that in the future for Uzbekistan?
Can you answer?
Yes, let me answer this question. This is a very important question, because as already mentioned several times, civil society is involved in all aspects of these coming elections. They are part of different groups, monitoring, making sure that the candidates are elected transparently, that the election campaign is done properly, so that the media outlets equally give platform for all political parties. So this is also, let's say, monitored by the civil society. And as for already mentioned, for example, civil society members will also be present at the on the election day, observing each, let's say, each moment of the elections, voting process, counting process. So this all will be also monitored by civil society activists. So this is very important. And after that, we have several associations of NGOs, several active big NGOs, including the Development Strategy Center. After the elections, we also report about our views, what we have observed, what were the, let's say, positives, negatives of the elections. We use the platform of the Central Election Commission, where we report both to the to everyone, which is usually live on TV, so people know what civil society think about. Other than that, of course, civil society is very actively using social networks, where they also can comment the elections which they faced. And then I should also mention that raising awareness of the people in terms of the one person has one vote is very actively happening currently, because by tradition there were families who could entrust their fathers, elderly people to vote for them. So this was, of course, challenged by the observers. But it was normal for the society because it was by tradition. But now there's a high campaign happening saying that one person has one vote, otherwise he or she will be fined. So that's why these processes will be evaluated, monitored, and after the elections will be, let's say, communicated to the society on TV, on social networks, which, as you already mentioned, will make further, let's say, cornerstones to future reforms in this direction.
Let me give, I think that the point is that to get a lesson from previous experience. Experience from the past was following that in Uzbekistan we have a main vehicle, main body for organizing elections as a Central Electoral Commission. Not Minister of Justice like in some countries, like not Minister of Interior in some countries. This is special Central Electoral Commission which is formed together by government and parliament. And it's responding to both of them. After each election, there is special task force group in Central Electoral Commission for scrutinizing the feedbacks and the reports of international observers, OSCE and other international organizations, civil society reports, as Eldor said, the citizens' application, and we have such a tradition to create a roadmap for improving next elections. As Nadir said, after getting a report from the OSCE and its body for monitoring election, we are item by item study every point, and mainly it's supposed to be applied either to legislation or to electoral practice. So this is, in short, I'm sure that this time, again, it will be the same mechanism applied.
Well, let me turn to each of you sort of for a wrap-up of this panel. I know, Senator, you're going to stay on for the next one. But let me start right down on the far end there. Nadir, what would be your hope for the overall election? Obviously, you would like your party to come out on top, but aside from that, what would you like to be taking away from this election campaign?
As I said, the election campaign has already started and it's in a very hot phase. And our party, as I said, we have done our homework. We have learned from our previous election mistakes and we're ready for the competition. And we really hope that we believe that the election will be fair, it will be competitive, and I'm sure there will be many debates and many meetings. And of course, our party will be very active in all these debates and in all these meetings, and we will do our best to present our platform to our constituency to get more votes. This is our main hope, and I hope that we'll get a very successful campaign.
Your thoughts on what you would like to see as the overall functioning of the election process, and what you would be as your hopes when you look back on this point of view?
We hope that this parliamentary election will be a key important for our political life, and will demonstrate the world how democratic reforms in Uzbekistan gaining such kind of results, and we show the best practice in our history.
Eldor, your thoughts and wishes for the upcoming election?
Yes, of course, I also hope that the elections will be at the phase of, they will be more competitive, they will be more transparent, and they will be the results of the irreversibility of reforms, the principle that the government is currently implementing. So I also hope to see how the mixed system, the electoral system, will work in the future, because at this stage Uzbekistan has introduced this mixed system at the top level, the parliament. Yeah, in the future it will be introduced to the regional and district level. So that's why I'm hoping to see how it will work at the top level. Afterwards, a lot have been talked about the digitalization. So that's why I hope to see the outcomes of this digitalization process that have been introduced in the electoral system, because there will be, I'm sure, moments to improve, moments to take into consideration in the future. Another very important issue, I'm hoping to see how the system, very, very new system, will work in Uzbekistan, because after these elections, the governors of regions and Tashkent city will not be chairing the local councils. This is a new norm introduced by the new constitution, and it will ensure more parliamentary oversight over now the local governors. So check and balance system will be even more ensured after these elections. So that's why I'm looking forward to the introduction of this system after election passes to make sure that now the local councils have the voice over the governors.
And Senator, your last thoughts on this, because as I say, we're going to move on in the next panel to discussing a bit more about the EU relations and global matters, but specifically staying with the Parliament, what for you, when you look back on it in a couple of months' time, will be the measure of success? Will it be voter turnout? Will it be a clean and clear, easy process? Will it be the speed of the election results coming out? What will it be?
2 points. First, I hope that coming elections will demonstrate more political activity and engagement of population. Simultaneously, it will demonstrate the more active role of political parties in formulating their agenda. And mainly, the result for me, I think that it will form in all levels, local and central, new type of Uzbek parliament, bringing people with new ideas, reform-oriented, brave enough to raise tough questions vis-à-vis executive branch of power, and who will make sure that reforms will go on.
Well, thank you all very much. I think you've given us a really good, rounded introduction to what is happening. Please, a round of applause for our panellists.
Thank you. Thank you. Should we stay here?
We're going to take a short coffee break, and now we will come back with that second panel to look at where Uzbekistan fits in the wider global jigsaw, including in particular relations with the EU. We will start that again at 5 o'clock, so join us back here at 5 p.m.
My seeds зовут Тимур, потому что я очень люблю Uzbekistan. He was surprised after that he spoke with his
Welcome back to this afternoon's discussion where we are looking at the Uzbekistan parliamentary elections that are coming up in 1 month. And on this second panel, looking further ahead to the future and where Uzbekistan will fit into the global context, and particularly its relations with the EU going forward. We're going to call this panel EU and Central Asia, what avenues for future cooperation? So we'll take stock of the whole area. Once again, I will be moderating the panel, but very keen to hear your questions if you have any, and you're joining online. Please do use the box on the screen next to our video. You can scan the QR code if you're in the room and you would like to put questions. Use your smartphone to scan that QR code and send your questions through to our panelists. If we've time at the end, we will get to some of those. So joining us once again, staying on from that first panel, Senator Sodiq Savoyev, who is the first Deputy Speaker of the Senate of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Still, you haven't changed. We also are joined by Aziz Kamidov, who is Head of Department, Ministry of Investments, Industry and Trade of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Joining us from the EEAS is Dietmar Chrysler, who is Head of the Central Asia Division currently, and prior to that was Head of the Afghanistan-Pakistan Division. Next to him we have Dumitru Fournier, who is Member Group 2, which is Workers and External Relations, which is the element we're interested in today, at the EESC. Don't say we don't get EU institutions in. And finally, we have joining us, bringing the academic perspective, Dr. Fabian Bassoit, who is Associate Professor and Coordinator at the Ghent Institute for International and European Studies at Ghent University here in Belgium. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's do a first round of introductions. Aziz, let me start with you. Tell us why you think it's important to be here today. What are you working on and what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aziz Hamidov, and I'm responsible for investment attraction to Uzbekistan in the Ministry of Investment, Industry and Trade. And I must say, it's really nice to come back to Brussels. It's a city where I feel at home. First time I came here, it was 15 years ago when I started to work in the Energy Charter Secretariat. And it's a pleasure to see many familiar faces. And it feels like little has changed in Brussels over the last 15 years. But a lot has changed in Uzbekistan. And I want to pass some messages to you today. And again, I mean, today Uzbekistan is an ideal partner for investment and trade for the EU. Now capturing 40% of all FDIs into the region, we are rapidly exceeding into WTO. And I have personally witnessed how we cut red tape and streamlined our bureaucracy, liberalizing investment, trade, and monetary procedures. And in short, Uzbekistan is about political stability, sustainable growth, high standards of the governance, and most importantly, openness to investment. That would be my key messages to understand, and we can elaborate further on that.
Let me turn then, Dietmar, to you. The EAS is the diplomatic reach out. Tell us what your perspective is and why you're happy to be on the panel today.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues. I see many familiar faces here, and that's reassuring because I work with a lot of you on these relations between Central Asia and the European Union. I would like to say that I believe there is a very good reason for the European Union and for Central Asia to work together to strengthen our mutual engagement, because I do believe this is also for the benefit of our citizens. It's in the European Union's, I would say, strategic interest that we cooperate closer with Central Asia. We have created many frameworks of cooperation as well as dialogues, and we have developed those frameworks in the past few years with our Central Asian colleagues, and they relate to, for example, trade, investment, the business climate, critical raw materials, sustainable connectivity, transport, digitalization, education, research, and so on and so on. But, you know, it's important that we discuss this issue today because we live in a very complex and difficult, challenging geopolitical landscape. And I think both sides have realized that in this geopolitical situation that we find ourselves, it is indeed mutually beneficial that we cooperate closer. And as I said, I do believe that we can also contribute to tangible benefits for our citizens in both regions, whether it is through access to critical raw materials for our industries, increased trade and investment opportunities, or whether it is by fostering a more stable and secure neighborhood. And as one scholar put it, for the Central Asian states, cooperation with the EU has complemented, but not replaced or undermined, their strong ties with Russia and China. And I think it's also an important issue that we should tackle this afternoon. Thank you.
We will do our best to tackle it in the time we have. Dimitru, with the External Action Services, the diplomatic arm, then the European Economic and Social Committee is representing the workers, civil society, employers. You're giving advice to other EU institutions. What is that advice when it comes to Uzbekistan? What are you working on?
Yeah, nice to meet you this afternoon. Central Asia was not for a long time in the attention of the European institution. And in our case, the European Economic and Social Committee had the first report on Central Asia in 2010. Afterwards was something in 2015. I've been co-rapporteur with a colleague from UK, Mr. Peel. And now we restarted to rethink all these relationships with Central Asia. Last year in 2023, in March, we had the Civil Society Forum, an excellent event which has been organized by the European External Action Service and also the European Commission. And we've been invited, we participated with many people from, various countries. And we arrived to the conclusion that why we don't have civil society platforms as we have in the case of other regions of the world. For example, with Latin American countries, we have civil society platform, we have groups of follow-up committees and so on, with Turkey, with many regions in the world. Central Asia, it's among the regions doesn't have this kind of relationships between civil society organizations. We call organized civil society. His Excellency from the Parliament from Uzbekistan discussed about the need to modernize the society. One of the factors coming from Romania, in an ex-Soviet system in a way, you know, one of the factors of modernization of Romania and many other countries, including Baltic countries, has been the development of the civil society organizations and also the strengthening and consolidation of the relationships at the international level between these representatives of civil society organizations. So now in the framework of the Global Gateway of the Strategic Partnership on Critical Raw Materials, which has been said, we have this enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement, which is enforcing our trade relationships and exchanges and standards. I think it's a huge opportunity for these regions to find his strategic interdependencies with the European Union and to work a little bit on the complementarities. There are a lot of industry which are in complementarity with European Union and can be a mutual beneficial relationships for the future.
Well, this is the introduction. We will build on it. Dr. Fabian, you have the chance to go last in your introduction. So tell us what you're working on and how it might complement what we're hearing already.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. As a scholar, I've been working on this topic, so the relations between Central Asia and the EU also for already quite a long time, so for over 15 years. And so I've done the reverse. So now already more than 15 years ago, I went to Tashkent for the first time, and I was back there earlier this year, and indeed, you know, the change that the country has gone under, and also Tashkent has gone under, is tremendous. For me personally, also not just being an academic, but just a human being, being able to witness that was also spectacular in a way. I mean, knowing how the country was back in 2008, and seeing how the country is really developing so quickly and is really prospering in a way is really, yeah, it's in a way an honor for someone like me, and especially, of course, knowing that I'm studying the relationship between Central Asia and the EU. And so still after all those years, I remain or I maintain this keen interest in this topic. And to a large extent, this is, of course, because the relationship has only been growing. So back in the early 2000s, as was already mentioned, of course, Central Asia was far from being a priority for the EU. Today, it's, of course, not the biggest priority for the EU, but at least we have really seen how the region has become increasingly important for the EU, up to the point where now we're seeing visits from European leaders almost monthly. So this really says a lot about how this relationship between Central Asia and the EU has been evolving in the past 15 years.
Well, Senator, Fabian has just said, that this region, including Uzbekistan, has become of increased interest from the European side. What about the vice versa? How important is the EU dimension as part of Uzbek foreign policy?
Fabian, first of all, thank you very much for your assessment of the development, dynamic development in Uzbekistan. I appreciate your words. Indeed, as you correctly said, maybe Uzbekistan, Central Asia is not the main priority for Europe, but we have some tendency, and tendency is upward. Let me mention, first of all, Central Asian strategy adopted by European Union. Second time, as you correctly said, there is growing number of dialogue. President Mirziyoyev visited twice Paris, twice Berlin, Rome, Budapest. We, as you said, have almost every month someone from dignitaries from European parliaments, governments in Uzbekistan. A week ago, Chancellor Scholz was there. Before, President of Italy, President of France, Macron, etc., etc., etc. So tendency, to my mind, is obvious. There's greater understanding of interdependence between the two regions. You know, this morning I had a meeting in the European Parliament, and I mentioned one case. In 1993, I attended the meeting between then President of Uzbekistan with the Chancellor Kohl, Helmut Kohl. And it was very interesting, memorable conversation. And Chancellor told, look, we should not think that Ural Mountains, like Chinese Wall, Great Chinese Wall, dividing our continent for two separate parts. We are living in one domain. We are living in increasingly interdependent world. We have same challenges, same hopes. And I think that today, with growing number of projects connecting Central Asia with Europe via South Caucasus, via Black Sea, building up new railroads connecting Far East via Central Asia with Europe, with the energy projects. A few months ago, Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan signed not only agreement on creating union type of relationship, but about transporting some energy resources from Uzbekistan, including green energy, renewable energy from Uzbekistan to Europe via Azerbaijan. There is something going on. And why from Uzbek side it's important? First of all, it's one of the priorities of our foreign policy. Uzbekistan is building European type of society. Secular democracy based on rule of law and market economy. That's why it's natural inclination of Uzbekistan to deal with European countries. President Mirziyoyev repeatedly told, that's okay, we have a wonderful relationship, important relationship with our traditional partners. But for us, it's very important to deal with European business. Two reasons: better technology, more modern, and highest level relatively highest level of the business ethic. If we want to eradicate corruption, bring higher standard of doing business, European business is something important for us. And after all, lastly, we're living in a time of polycrisis. Difficult time, never observed in our lifetime. Time when some catastrophic events going on simultaneously. I think that mainly was preordained by deficit of understanding and dialogue. And I think that today, creating bridge between Europe and Central Asia is about bridging different civilizations, regions, cultures, and getting more mutual understanding. That's why we highly appreciate our cultural ties. The exhibitions in Louvre last year, in Linden Museum in Stuttgart, and in Berlin demonstrated once again the huge interest from European public to the history of civilization. By the way, these days, I can still mention London as a part of Europe or not, I don't know. But still in London, there is an exhibition about the Silk Road legacy. So I think that such kind of ties in education sphere of science, culture, is important for all of us.
This will tie into something we may get the chance on, if time allows, to talk on in the future about tourism, which may be relevant. But for now, Aziz, let's come on to the EU's global gateway and the role it might play in modernising Central Asian infrastructure with a view to further integrating with European markets. I was lucky enough to host the Global Gateway Investors Forum back in January, and a lot of aspirations were set out, a lot of memorandums of understanding signed. Some of those have come to fruition. The Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor Coordination Platform is happening. What are the other concrete things that you can see on the ground, and what role for the Global Gateway outreach as a whole?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. It's a very interesting question. Well, Uzbekistan, first of all, prioritized investments over technical assistance. There are some European companies, investing already in Uzbekistan, and many are exploring the opportunities. And we would like to see, our preference would be to see EU to act as a catalyst, in enabling investments into Uzbekistan. And there is a good example that EU can follow. Look at the Gulf state countries who are heavily investing into the country, and also the Asian countries, and maybe France as an exception. I would say that is a big investor, in energy, who acts as one of the key players for the energy transition processes in Uzbekistan. We can witness such companies like Total, the Electricité de France, Voltalia, who started their investments from like $100 million, and now they're expanding their investments. And we can account for the already billion of dollars. It's a sign of the trust of the country, and it's a good signal to international community, to international investors. And we should, I think, work in that direction, how we can cooperate and promote investments into the region. Another aspect, we can see that under the great leadership of our president, we already witnessed the endorsement from international business community, endorsement of the reforms which we have implemented over the 7 years. And GSP Plus, I would say, is a block for the foundation and transformation of the Uzbekistan economy. And since we are one of the 8 countries who can enjoy this preference, and more than 6,000 of items produced in Uzbekistan can be freely exported to the EU market. So it's also a good signal for the EU investors to locate their manufacturing facilities since they already know that there is access to the EU market without any taxes and burdens. So that would identify the great opportunities for the investors who are still exploring the country. And if there are any investors or corporates in the room, feel free to talk to me after the meeting.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Just to add that the development of the Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor is indeed a global gateway flagship project, as you know. And I think a lot has been done since we came together at the end of January for this Investors Forum. And I just wanted to add that political engagement will continue at the highest level on this flagship project. And in this regard, it's important to note that EU Commissioner for International Partnerships, Commissioner Urpilainen, will travel to Ashgabat next week, and she will have a meeting with the 5 transport ministers of the Central Asian countries, also of other transport ministers of the corridor, so-called corridor countries. And the idea is to launch this coordination platform that we had agreed upon back in January in order to make this initiative more concrete in terms of who would be interested to invest in which part of this endeavor, because you remember it's a complicated story with a lot of proposals for hard infrastructure investments that would need to be made, but there's also issues about regulation, about digitalization, about customs processes. It's basically tackling the bottlenecks of this middle corridor, and here we need a better coordination. Hence, the idea to create a platform, and that platform will be politically launched next week on the 3rd of October in Ashgabat in Turkmenistan, in the presence of Commissioner Urpilainen of the European Commission.
Very timely then that we have you here. But let's stay with this idea of investment in the region. I mean, you're mentioning transport connectivity, but that's not the only area. We see things like raw materials, agri. Tell me a little bit more about where are the most strategic, interesting parts for the EU to invest in this whole central region, but in Uzbekistan in particular?
Well, I think it has been mentioned that critical raw materials is indeed a very important area of cooperation between Central Asia and the European Union. I do believe it's a win-win cooperation if it's done the right way. So far, we have concluded memoranda of understanding with Kazakhstan and with Uzbekistan on critical raw materials. We are also in touch and discussing with the 3 other Central Asian countries about similar agreements. What is important is to fill these declarations with concrete action. Hence, an action plan has been developed under the Memorandum of Understanding with Kazakhstan on critical raw materials. That is sort of being implemented. But it is not between governments only. It requires really the engagement and the commitment of the private sector. And this is where we need to really work on. We have to increase the interest of the private sector to invest meaningfully in the Central Asian region, whether it is on critical raw materials, whether it's on green energy, transport connectivity we have just mentioned. There's also an issue that we like to support, that is digital connectivity. This is an important issue. My colleagues from the European Commission are working hard on that strand of our cooperation through a so-called Team Europe initiative on digital connectivity. This is where we want to get as many interested EU member states on board to engage with us, but also to provide the necessary financial means to enhance digital connectivity between Europe and Central Asia by creating technical facilities to establish internet connections via satellite and also covering as many areas in Central Asia that probably for the time being have not a stable internet access.
Wonderful points. Let me add a few words. If you will ask me what happened during the recent 7 years in new Uzbekistan, I think that due to the renewed foreign policy of Uzbekistan, the situation in Central Asia changed. And at last, we might see Central Asia as unified region with growing perspective to consider it as a growing market. Central Asia, it's today almost 100 million population, big market. Its GDP is going to reach $700 billion US. It is leading in the world, one of the leading producers of energy resources, oil and gas, among the top 10, lithium, uranium, and gold, and copper. Soon, Uzbekistan will outpace Chile soon, because there is a $4 billion US project near Tashkent in Al Malik, and it's going to produce more than 100 million tons of the 100 million tons of copper annually. However, I think that saying that today situation is changed, at last European companies might consider investing not only to Uzbekistan, but via Uzbekistan to the huge market. Of course, naturally, we are from Uzbekistan and we promote Uzbekistan, but because Uzbekistan is the real hub for Central Asia. It's the only country which has a common border with all other Central Asian countries, including Afghanistan. Secondly, we now have a more understanding in a more regional approach. Next year, we hope, at last in May or April, there will be a summit, European Union, Central Asia. And Madame von der Leyen will come, will lead team of the top-level officials from Brussels to Samarkand, city in Uzbekistan, to talk about the joint projects. And thank you very much. It's not only about supplying raw materials from Central Asia and technology from the Europe. No, we are talking about the synergy of opportunities in both regions. And I think that growing digital business in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan, might be a platform for some projects in a sphere of digital economy and green economy as well.
Dimitri, we've covered a lot of a lot of points here. So I'll ask you to unpack a little bit what you've heard and tell us where you would prefer to put the focus if you had to prioritize.
Yeah, but it's something which is appearing naturally. When I've been last time in Uzbekistan, I traveled to Bukhara, to Samarkand, and I realized that the train infrastructure between Tashkent and Samarkand, it's better like in the Eastern European country, with the speed of 200 kilometers for the classical train. Also, Uzbekistan did very important investments in high-speed trains. It's a limited number, but the fact that the Uzbekistan adopted Spanish technology, which I know very well because I lived in Spain, that means it's a proof of vision in this regard, because a country so big like Uzbekistan needs this kind of investments, and I'm sure Kazakhstan also. Speaking about investments, the ambassador from the Netherlands embassy in Tashkent, I understood that in Kazakhstan, your neighbor, the investments, the Dutch investments, Dutch registered investments in Kazakhstan were somewhere 100 billion euro in 30 years of investment, more than Chinese and Russian investors' investments altogether. So sometimes we ourselves in Europe, we don't have the image what we are doing there. And that was one of the purpose of the Global Gateway, to gather more intelligence about the European companies which are active in this countries, and including in Uzbekistan, in order to understand better which are the opportunities. What I saw as a country which is producing the, cars, for example, cheap cars. I saw Daewoo, which has been producing Craiova, for example, in Romania. I saw the company which is now producing 70,000 cars, type Daewoo type, as we call it in the Eastern Europe, which are, I've been amazed about the fact that was just one company with one color which was dominated was the white, which has been dominated in Tashkent. I see there huge opportunity for this market because it's easy to be interconnected with the European companies, and this is huge. Before European Union invested a lot in Avtovaz, for example, in Moscow, but now due to the sanctions, Romanian teams been there to put some equipment and so on. I see the opportunity to reorient some of these investments in this kind of region. And afterwards, the agri-food industry and the water management aspects, which we have a certain experience in Europe. Netherlands, for example, again, has a huge experience in managing the water supply and so on. I think it's another line of discussion, as we call it here, the blue economy. And a little bit to put from the social perspective, more that you're integrated with the global markets and economies like European Union, you will feel the pressure from the civil society organizations. You'll feel the need to have a consumer organization because you need to defend your citizens from the greed of the corporations, as we call it, if it's the case. Not always is the case, but you'll need this. You'll need environmental protection because as you will develop critical raw materials projects or raw material projects, will be more and more pressure on the environment and so on in communities. You'll need to have human rights activists to defend various sectors of activity. But it's what you said at the beginning. It's a change of mentality. It's a proactive approach and not always resistance to, because I see repeating the idea that you defend the traditional values of the country. The same we have in the Orthodox narrative in Eastern European countries. We have the same, chimeras, which in a way are main target of the propaganda, because when you want to touch something, you say, no, they are defending our tradition, they are fighting against our tradition, it's something dangerous, so we have to be very worried. It's not, it's something in the society, it has a limit, but that should not stop you from evolving as a society, modernizing and going forward. And you can just compare with what your neighbor in China, how they approach the issue. China is not our model, but if you see how they treat many of these issues which are called traditional, you will see more freedom in China in approaching these subjects. And one of them, where I refer, and I know that is the target of the propaganda in these countries and not only in Moldova the same. I think it's a line that you have to look a little bit around. And the Economic and Social Council, in Moldova, we are discussing about Economic and Social Council because they feel it now with the accession process that they need new institution to address the concerns of the citizens. I will stop a little bit.
You've taken us on a journey, I have to say there, Dimitri, looking at trade and investment and bringing it right back around again to questions, if you like, of maturity of democracy and confidence in your country. Fabian, let's step away again from trade and investment and take a slightly bigger picture approach and tell me, in a nutshell, or if you can, what do you think the EU Central Asia cooperation will look like under the next mandate? Now, I know we only have, we don't have a full college yet confirmed, but we have suggestions and we have a sense that certain portfolios, indeed, Commissioner Urpilainen's portfolio at least, will be carried forward with the Czech Commissioner if approved. We have to put that caveat in. But what do you think the things will look like in a broader context, not just trade and investment?
Well, actually, so based on the early signs that we're receiving from the new European Commission, so from the EU side, I think the focus is likely to be really more on pursuing so-called material interests of the EU. And hence, we are likely to see quite a strong focus on economic and infrastructure-related cooperation, so much in line with what we have been discussing so far. Also, interestingly, it seems that the new European Commission is more interested in protecting the EU's own democracy rather than putting a strong focus on supporting democracy externally. So as a result, I would say it's likely that the EU will be less vocal and probably also less active when it comes to democracy and human rights in Central Asia. It doesn't mean that there will be no support from the EU. And for instance, also with the parliamentary elections in Uzbekistan, of course, the EU always stands ready to offer support if there is a request for this support. But the EU will likely become more proactive in this regard. Then from the side of the Central Asian states, it's clear from also what we have been hearing here in the panel and in the previous panel that they're very keen on enhancing economic and infrastructure-related cooperation with the EU. Hence, they will be very pleased to hear that there will be an enhanced focus from the EU on economic and infrastructure-related matters. Of course, at the same time, the EU and Central Asia will continue to work together on a wide range of issues, just like they have been doing until now. And so in that regard, of course, I don't expect any substantial change. So, of course, they will continue to cooperate on education, on fighting climate change, and so on. So there, I really don't expect any real change. It's more, generally speaking, there might be a shift in discourse when it comes to like more focus on economic and infrastructure-related matters compared to the previously outspoken focus on promoting democracy and respect for human rights.
I mean, if what you're saying comes to pass, you're correct in your predictions. And the EU in general does take a less proactive approach in, if you like, supporting or exporting democracy and democratic values. Does that not dovetail rather well with already the progression that we're seeing in the region, particularly in Uzbekistan and other places as well, like Kazakhstan, where perhaps they need less help? Fabienne?
That's a difficult question to answer. From what I can tell, based on academic analysis, the region is not really progressing substantially when it comes to democracy. Obviously, there have been some improvements here and there. But generally speaking, also on a global level, actually, there has been rather a backlash against democracy rather than a progress, and even within Europe, this is the case. And actually, that's also why based on the signals that we are that they are much more concerned now with protecting their own democracy rather than having to invest now heavily in supporting democracy externally. So if you would put it in a more global picture, democracy is in decline. And this is also happening within Europe, and hence why there's sort of an alarming feeling of, okay, we perhaps should first prioritize on what's happening here within Europe rather than what's going on outside of Europe.
Well, as I said in the last panel, even democracy under threat is something for very mature democracies and can't be taken for granted. Let's park that discussion for now. Aziz, let me sort of nail down you on some of the things you mentioned earlier, particularly with regard to joining the WTO. And what are the current stumbling blocks there for the moment? Where does agreement and work with the EU help in that aspiration? And obviously there's obvious reasons for wanting to join the World Trade Organization, but what might be the barriers if we were to put a little bit of a negative view on it?
Well, I mean, the accession into WTO itself is not a panacea. We already has progressed and achieved a lot over the last 7 years in liberalizing our economy, introducing the best world standard market practices, including the legislation, and all these economic reforms are driven by the large local market. Uzbekistan itself is 37 million population, and every year we have 1 million babies born. And it was mentioned before, we have a very young, population, and it's our big human, I would say, the capital. And on the other hand is that we've been listening to recommendation of international financial institutions like a World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and EU itself. And the EU template would serve as a good benchmark for us to calibrate the requirements to enter the WTO. And I think we incorporate that and we take into account all the best practices. We are developing relations with all the countries, and the government itself is very proactive in business, and we are more pro-oriented on the business and the commercial activities. This is what's happening in Uzbekistan, and we managed to offer to the best services also, and by setting the good benchmarks. And again, the EU also played a major role in the transformation of Uzbekistan itself, while acceding to the WTO itself.
But let me intervene. Aziz correctly pictured the situation with access to WTO. Let me say so, in short. We have done our homework from Uzbek side. For instance, and as a parliamentarian, I can tell you that during the recent years, we adopted 60 laws which bring our legislation in accordance with the requirement of WTO. Recently, we had 2 months ago, the Secretary General of WTO in Uzbekistan, and I had a chance to talk with her, and she visited our university. She appreciated the Uzbek side's endeavor. Only impediment now is completing negotiation with our partners. And I would like here, being in Brussels, urge our European partners to expedite the negotiating process with Uzbekistan and to complete. So ball is now in the side of our partners, and we hope the coming month, from Uzbek side, it's one of the main priorities. We realize that it's in our best interest to accelerate this process of accession to WTO, and we'll do that.
Dietmar, I know you're as the EAS is a diplomatic, it's political side of things rather than a trade side of things. But do memberships of things like the WTO have an impact on how those diplomatic relationships can continue? I mean, I'm thinking of things like, boycotts. There was a boycott on cotton due to child labour, but you mentioned all these laws that have changed, and that is no longer the case. I mean, they might be driven by trade or economic concerns, changes, lead to better diplomatic relations?
Definitely. I'm convinced. The more the Central Asian countries are integrated in the world multilateral system, and the more engagement and commitment there is to upholding this multilateral system, the more attractive they will become as almost like-minded partners for other regions and countries. And we do appreciate that the Central Asian countries, on the one hand, express support for the multilateral system and the principles of that system. I think it has never been so important to do so than to do that also publicly. While at the same time, the European Union also respects the relations that still exist, the strong relations that exist between the Central Asian countries and Russia. This is a fact, and we cannot deny that. But your support to the United Nations, to the principles of the UN Charter, I think is extremely important. And if I may just come back to a previous question about the future of EU relations with Central Asia, I do believe we can expect, and we are working towards a positive trajectory of these relations. We have an ambitious plan. We have a joint roadmap that we have adopted between the foreign ministers of the European Union and the foreign ministers of Central Asia about a year ago in Luxembourg. It really has identified the main key strands of where we want to work closer together. It has also identified not less than 79 concrete action points that we want to tackle in those different areas of cooperation. I'm really convinced that if we put all our energies together, we'll be making tremendous progress on this joint roadmap. And I come back to what has been said before. Holding the first ever EU Central Asia Summit in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, hopefully during the first half of next year, will give a tremendous boost to EU Central Asia relations. I'm convinced it will create a momentum. And why not also discussing between ourselves whether we should not elevate our relations to a more strategic partnership.
Well, it's very timely as well. The beginning of next year would be ideal. Fabian, let's talk about the sphere of influence in Central Asia. You mentioned it. Tell us, in your assessment as an academic, what are the implications of Russia's influence in the region?
Well, of course, there's a lot of talk about a possible declining role for Russia in Central Asia, but I think any academic who really does have real expertise on Central Asia will argue that this is not the case. So Russia is still a very influential and important actor in Central Asia, and this is not likely to change in the near future. And it's also good to hear from EU institutional actors that there is this acknowledgement. There's also, of course, I mean, it's in the interest of the Central Asian countries to keep a close partnership with Russia. That's how it is. And so they're not willing to cut ties with Russia because that would be against their own interests. At the same time, what we also very clearly can observe is that all Central Asian countries, they remain very much preoccupied with safeguarding their sovereignty. And actually, more than ever before, they are really balancing their relations and within a wider range of external actors and countries. And so the EU and the member states of the EU, they're of course important factors within the foreign policy of the Central Asian countries. Especially if we then focus on Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, who are, I would say, the most active when it comes to trying to expand their external relations. It's clear that they're really working hard on further developing their relationship with the EU. And I don't think they will let Russia dictate what they can or cannot do in their relationship with the EU. Now, at the same time, of course, an issue that the EU is struggling with is that, we still have really have a predominance of Russian narratives and fake news about the EU across the whole region. And this really does undermine still the credibility and the appeal of the EU as a partner for the Central Asian countries. This is a reality. I know that the EU has been trying to introduce programs, projects, sort of try to mitigate this, but it seems that this is an extremely difficult issue to address.
I don't know if anybody else wants to get onto this issue before we park Russia for now and look at other parts of the region. I think we'll move on to, because I mean, you mentioned as well Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan previously sort of occupied, if you like, a leading position in the region. But how is Uzbekistan becoming more strategic? Fabian, I'd like you to tackle that, and then maybe we'll come on as well to Dietmar. I'm thinking particularly in light of the situation in Afghanistan. What has changed there? Because Uzbekistan obviously has a border with Afghanistan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, the major turning point was really, of course, the death of President Karimov, because it's really only in the wake of Karimov's death that we've seen how Uzbekistan was gradually opening up to the outside world. I mean, already before scholars who were experts on the region, they could, of course, see the huge potential that Uzbekistan had. But, of course, it was only when Karimov died and then when Mirziyoyev came to power that we witnessed how the country finally opened up to the outside world, and also how they really started using the huge potential that they have. And so we have seen, of course, this tremendous reforms-oriented agenda that has been pursued by Uzbekistan in the past few years, and which is continuing every day. And this is, of course, an ongoing process that will be carried on for quite some time. But really, by upscaling its reforms domestically, and then at the same time investing very heavily in expanding and enhancing diplomatic ties with the outside world. This is really how we can see Uzbekistan quickly becoming a regional powerhouse in the region. And this, to a large extent, has to do with the central location of Uzbekistan within Central Asia, also bordering Afghanistan. At the same time, it also has to do with the fact that it has the largest population of the countries in the region. And also an important aspect is that it has a very young population, which again means that there's huge potential there.
Dietmar, I mean, I'd like your thoughts. I mean, the US withdrawal from Afghanistan was destabilizing. I mean, where does, break it down for us in how that impacts EU diplomacy in the region?
No, certainly the US withdrawal from Afghanistan was a game changer. And the fear was that, you know, of a negative security spillover into Central Asia, in particular into the neighboring Central Asian countries, those countries bordering Afghanistan, perhaps Tajikistan in the first place, but also Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. That has not happened. That is not to say that the border between the Central Asian countries and Afghanistan is a safe border. On the contrary, it's a border which is weak, which is soft, which is poorly managed to a certain degree. And this is where the European Union security interests come into the play. Central Asia security is to a certain degree also the EU's security. And we have same concerns. We need to address those concerns jointly, whether it is about the spread of extremism, of terrorism, of you know, the illicit trafficking of weapons, of drugs, of human beings. All these are issues that the Central Asians are exposed to as frontline states, I would say. But this is exactly where we offer dialogue, high-level dialogue on security issues. We have the EU Special Representative for Central Asia, Terry Hakala, together with the EU Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Thomas Nicholson, and they meet regularly with the 5 Central Asian Special Envoys and Special Representatives on Afghanistan to discuss these kind of issues and what the EU can do better to help you. In addition, we have regional programs on border management. We have programs on reducing drug-related crimes and these kind of things. So there is a lot going on. Whether it is enough, I don't know. But we are looking at this, and it is something that, you know, it's an area of cooperation, this regional security, that we really take extremely seriously with our Central Asian partners.
Not to mention the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan and how that impacts on how you can actually sit down around a table and have talks. Senator, I'm interested in your thoughts on the situation in Afghanistan, but particularly your insight on how you think the international community should deal with the regime in Kabul.
First of all, Dietmar, I'm not in a position to talk about Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, but I can assure you that our border with Afghanistan is not weak and is well managed. So don't be afraid to coming in Uzbekistan. There is no danger with that. And but first of all, in regard with Afghanistan, it is true that it's an immediate neighbor of the whole region, and its main priority for Central Asian countries and Uzbekistan to deal with Afghanistan. I'm not talking about the formal recognition or not recognition of the government. It's another point. Though, in classical diplomacy, we recognize not government, we recognize country. And dealing with the current government, want we or not like with them or dislike them. First priority for Tashkent's diplomacy is not forget about Afghanistan, not repeat the mistake of beginning of 19th when Afghanistan was abandoned by international community and became safe haven for international terrorism and caused so many trouble for the world, number one. Secondly, isolating government of Afghanistan, not talking with them, it's not solution. Sanctions are not solution in regard with Afghanistan. Ruling officials, government will not suffer from them, believe me. Who will suffer? Women, elderly people, kids. 90% of people in Afghanistan is starving now. After the withdrawal of United States and other Western forces from Afghanistan, the GDP of this country was cut for a half. If international community will not do something, there will be humanitarian catastrophe. And here is the spillover effect, not in regard with the religious extremism, ideology or something. This is spillover which is more viable, and we should, that's why Tashkent created in a Termez, bordering city with Afghanistan, transport hub for delivering all humanitarian aid mobilized under the aegis of United Nations to Afghanistan. And to do that, we should deal with Taliban, just for organization. And the main point is Afghanistan, ruling government in Afghanistan, Taliban, will not disappear anytime soon. There is no force within Afghanistan to confront them and to challenge their position. They are for good. We should admit that. To try to create some forces who will fight against Taliban is not productive. Secondly, main danger in Afghanistan is the Khorasan terroristic organization. It's only Taliban who are really fighting against them. And Khorasan is able to create trouble in Europe, in Central Asia, everywhere. And I think somehow to coordinate with Taliban our efforts to fight against the Khorasan terroristic organization is in our best interest. And lastly, for us in Central Asia, we think that the priority is to stop think about Afghanistan as a source of threat. It's a time to think about Afghanistan as a source of opportunities. You know, Uzbekistan is only double landlocked country in the world, except Liechtenstein, but it's another case. And for us, getting the transport route via Afghanistan to Indian Ocean, to the Gulf, is the best way to be closer to Europe. Now it requires 20-25 days for our trains with a cargo to reach the first seaport. If there will be transport corridor within Afghanistan, it will be 2 days. So transport costs will diminish tremendously. And moreover, there are not only economic effect. If Afghanistan, again, like centuries ago, became the transport hub, transit hub, it will be a peacing project. It's the only way to bring a peace to this country. Because for now, narcotics is the main source of the income in this country. And narcotics demands a weak government, corruption, and they undermine the statehood idea. If there will be the social economic projects like railroad, it will change paradigm of development of this country. And I think that here, with the European countries, we can do a lot. After all, we should admit that 90% of drugs, illegal drugs, consuming in Europe has an Afghan origin. And Fabian, thank you very much for your remarks. In regard with the Central Asian dynamics, I'd like the audience to understand one point. there is no competition. There should be no competition between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, who is the first, who is the best, who is running faster. It's in Central Asia, the reality is such as that if Kazakhstan will prosper, we will gain from that. If Uzbekistan will prosper, all other countries will. Now, if you will ask me what's the main point of the Mirziyoyev new policy, I would say clear understanding that we're mutually dependent and we have a clear interest in success of all our neighboring countries, including Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, and Afghanistan. And I think that, respond to your question, why Uzbekistan became today more or less being considered successful. Again, referring to the classical diplomatic history, country is successful when it has ideas. Leadership, it's not about imposing something or being mighty. It's about creating ideas, about leading. And I think that the new policy of Uzbekistan was about creating ideas and showing, demonstrating the way how to resolve the issues via compromise. And that's why during the few years, the issues which looked like impasse being resolved, border issues, at last, we fixed the borders. Water management issues, at last, it's not a matter which dividing us, but uniting us. Energy resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that because due to the initiative policy of Tashkent and diplomacy of Uzbekistan, today we might be more or less optimistic about the future of Central Asia. It's one among the rare regions of the world which doesn't, toi 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 as we in Germany say, don't have some bloody conflicts.
Well, while we leave this segment, I'll underline again from a European perspective that any work with the Taliban should go hand in hand with advancement on women's rights. Exactly. We'll park it there and finish on a somewhat lighter note, because you did say don't be afraid to come to Uzbekistan. So let's talk tourism, Aziz. It's a major growth potential for the country. It's got the possibility to really increase economy. Tell me a bit about, I know there's visa agreements in place. Tell me a bit more about that and what the potential is.
Yeah, absolutely. There is untapped potential. And we have already established free visa regimes with 90 countries, including the EU countries, which is also a good boost, for promoting our tourism and making the Uzbek tourism is a crown jewel, the region, because since we have such a big history. We have ancient cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, the whole world knows that, and they're coming here. And most important is to continue developing the good infrastructure, since more and more tourists are coming to the country, and we need to accommodate them. We need to show the great hospitality. And here there is also opportunity for EU countries to invest into the tourism infrastructure. We still have a deficit of the hotels. We still have a deficit in the railroad infrastructure, and my message would be for the EU and European companies is to explore these opportunities, and we have developed the value propositions for different sectors. And given that, I would like to refer to the Mario Draghi report about the loss of competitiveness in the EU and the stagnation. And I think here is the opportunity to foster cooperation, to help each other, to integrate further into the region. And I think this is exactly what we need to seek further in establishing the long-term relations and having the clear vision. And I would like to invite all of you to Uzbekistan just to see for yourself to judge by yourself and to gather together and with great minds alike here and to discuss further what opportunities we can do together. That would be my message today.
Dimitri, I wanted to bring you in as well because you talked about coming together. The Silk Road was this great exchange of knowledge and culture, and I'm wondering, do we have a Silk Road 2.0 where we could exchange best practices, workers, learning from each other, skills? What's possible?
Indeed, the investments, the social investments, as we call it, the exchanges between students, for example, between representatives of civil society organizations, business environment, trade unionists, why not, will improve our common understanding on the opportunities in the area. And of course, if you are in the area, you understand better. When I've been in Samarkand, again with a trip, I was invited to go to Kabul, for example, speaking about how sure is the border. Many people in Samarkand, they go to make shopping in Kabul. Nowadays, it's possible. Having a vision about an alternative route, it's also a very interesting point. We are exploring also in our committee this discussion about what can be done for Afghanistan and Pakistan in order to create this alternative. We've always thought in terms of the Silk Route, but creating variants which are agreed globally by global governance. We have this experience even in Europe. We have a Danube Convention, which is dealing with international matters. So I don't think we have to exclude something if we want to create these opportunities for countries like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. We, the European Economic and Social Committee, this Saturday, I fly to Almaty and afterwards to Astana to discuss what has been said by your representative on investments. I discussed with Mr. Margulan Baymukan, His Excellency Ambassador of Kazakhstan. They created already Kazakh Invest here in Brussels. So I don't know in which stage you are. We have permanent contacts, and I am sure that from now on we will have also with Uzbekistan, because it's not a competition, it's complementarity. It's what you said, a Commonwealth area that can be created, and we are discussing about how we can modernize certain institutions to adopt some common standards, because the standardization helps us a lot in the technological exchanges, in the commercial practices. So we have all the interest. With other regions of the world, we have EAS knows very well. We have these free trade agreements. And the free trade agreements, they are coming with domestic advisory groups. So we met regularly for people from South Korea, from Vietnam, for example, from various regions of the world. We met with civil society organizations, with the business environment, labor environment. And in these environments, we are exchanging views and opportunities about what this region means. So if it is a vision, the vision should focus on what Uzbekistan will like to achieve in the next period, and to be, of course, I understand this posture of Uzbekistan sovereignness, to say, in a way, to affirm yourself. Romania was this kind of country between West and East within the communist system. So we try to have our things, our own things. So it's understandable. But now we are living in this complex society where the technology will interact and will put on horizontal all the political and social relationships. So we will not depend on the governments to keep the people, isolated. So it's like in China, Laotsism versus Confucianism. The Chinese, when they want to promote something, they promote Confucianism. But in the countries, they practice the Laotsi system, where it's based more on the ignorance of the mass. And outside, of course, where China, it's based on the making the masses more aware, self-aware about their power, about their knowledge, and so on. So I think it's a path. It's a crossroad for Uzbekistan, and has tremendous opportunities now, because there are so many actors in the regions, which up to now was unbelievable, was not even conceivable for many.
Well, we're pretty much at the end, but it's been a very good conversation, so I'm feeling generous. I'm going to grant 5 wishes, 1 each, for what you would wish for the Uzbekistan-EU relationship. Dietmar, I'll start with you. What's your wish?
Just maybe compliment, because I found it extremely important what you said, but my wish would be to bring the people of Uzbekistan and the EU closer together, the people of Central Asia for that matter, and the EU by by forging more people-to-people contacts, whether it's between researchers, students, all kinds of different groups that we have also identified, by the way, in our joint roadmap. And my plea is also that the Central Asian countries make better use of the existing programs of the European Union. We have a lot of those programs. They're well funded, Erasmus, Horizon. There are existing opportunities. They need to be used and seized. And after all, it's people, making up these relations between countries and regions.
Who would like to have their wish next to be granted? Aziz?
Well, my wish would be very simple. I would encourage that European, companies to be more active, in seeing Uzbekistan as a reliable, trusted partner for the investments. And we're not simply seeking your investments. We are seeking your technologies. We need your technologies, and we are ready to co-invest with our European partners. We have several equity funds, and we have support of international financial institutions, and we're ready to do that together with you.
Fabienne?
Well, my wish would also be, first of all, to see indeed more people-to-people contacts. And it could indeed be between students, between experts, scholars, researchers, but it could also be indeed between business people, which would be very much in line also with the previous wish. But for me personally, I hope that there will be more mutual learning. I know that Uzbekistan has already tried to learn a lot from the EU and EU member states, but my wish would be for the EU to learn more from Uzbekistan.
Dimitri?
Yes, I have a clear wish, and this is the main reason why I'm here. My wish, as rapporteur of the Committee on Central Asia issues and now on Kazakhstan, but I'm sure will be also Uzbekistan in the discussion, is to have a civil society platform which will be built based on the work of the EAS on the Civil Society Forum, which is organized annually in Central Asia. My wish is to have, and of the European Economic and Social Committee, is to have a civil society platform where EU Central Asia, which maybe will be supported by the Global Gateway as a concrete program, and on the long term we will be able to arrive to a certain structured dialogue with the civil society organization, and finally to what is the objective of some countries in European Union, which we have this model, to have institutionalized civil and social dialogue like Economic and Social Council or committees, whatever you want to name it, and that will help us to maintain bilateral relations, to maintain the institutional memory, and to have very good contacts which are structured with members of the parliament, members of the governments, and members of other relevant institutions. So this is my wish, and I think this will be an element of modernization, and I'm personally involved as a Moldovan from Romania. I am involved in the creation of this Economic and Social Council in Republic of Moldova, which I am sure will increase the visibility of the country and the opportunities in the future. Thank you very much. A big wish.
A big wish, lots of big wishes. And Senator, your final wish.
Second time, you're putting me in difficult position. Yep. Being last in responding to the same question after so wonderful speakers who made a very wise point. But my point is that maybe summarizing being said by my friends and colleagues here, I very much want that cooperation between Central Asian countries, Uzbekistan, and European countries will be based not only on mutual interest, but on shared values, shared principles, which is the most sustainable way for cooperating. It means, and I fully agree with Dimitris, that we should involve people-to-people diplomacy, heart-to-heart diplomacy, as defined by our American partners. And I think that's the only way to strengthen ties between our regions and to galvanize its potential. Thank you.
Well, even if my magic wand can't grant all those wishes immediately, I'm sure the people in this room and those joining online and forums like this and conversations like this will hopefully lead to many of those wishes being granted. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us online, and of course to the Euractiv team for working so hard to put today's event together. You can find out more about Euractiv debates by visiting events.euractiv.com, and we hope you will join us again in the future. But for today, have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful moderating.